Now, at this time, I'd like to begin the job interview. I'd like to take your questions online. I'd like to answer your questions and hopefully give you a sense of why I would like to be Lieutenant Governor. And thank you so much for your time this afternoon. So let's take some questions if we could. We have one from Curtis Walker from Grass Valley. And the question is, what accomplishment as a legislator are you most proud of? Curtis, let me tell you first and foremost, we have done a lot in the legislature, but probably the single most important piece of legislation that we've worked on is our help with farm workers. You know, there used to be a time when farm workers their deaths in the Central Valley were part of the harvest. You know, we put in a bill that simply said that farm workers should not be sitting on wooden benches, on paint cans, and when the deaths occurred here on our highways, they wouldn't be seen as part of the harvest. In fact, we put in a bill that Cesar Chavez wrote about back in 1969 in the Los Angeles Times when farm workers were killed in Florida. We finally got this bill passed through the legislature. I can honestly tell you with pride that a farm worker van crash has not occurred in the Central Valley in a certified van, and farm workers are far safer here in the Valley. And I think that's a good thing for all of us. Farm worker safety has to be a priority. And I can tell you that we were very, very proud of the bill that was signed. We think it saves lives. We think it's proven that it works. And we're extremely fortunate that our farm workers can now come home after a hard day's work to see their family intact. And I think the Valley is a safer place for it. The next question is from Sherry from Salinas, and she asked, why did you change the name of the Ag Committee to the Food and Ag Committee? Well, I can tell you that the Pro Tem, who I'm very thankful for, allowed us to change the name of the committee that I now chair, which is now the Food and Ag Committee. And let me tell you why we changed the name. We should no longer be working just on the production of agriculture from a committee point of view. We wanted to make sure that we included two words, consumption and distribution. The consumption of food, how we eat food, what's in our food, where it's coming from, how it's packaged is of concern to Californians today. Consumers needed a voice at the table. And I'm very proud that we diversified this agriculture committee. I'm proud to have Senator Hancock from Berkeley on our committee. I'm very proud to have Senator Fran Pavley from Santa Monica on our committee. I think it rounds out the committee so that the committee isn't captured, if you will, by rural Republicans or rural Democrats. Food is a statewide issue, and I was very, very proud of the fact that we've already had hearings such as how much antibiotics should be in our food. Are we, in essence, having safer food because of that? And I'm extremely proud of our work to work on issues such as food recalls and making sure that the manufacturers understand what we're doing. We have a bill in today that says that if something is recalled, that we ought to catch it at the scanner level. There's no reason we shouldn't be able to catch items at the scanner given that they've been recalled. And hopefully that bill, Senate Bill 550, will move through the California legislature with your support. I ask you all to weigh in on that. That last line of defense before you walk out of that store should be at that scanner. If something is recalled, those stores should match it up with their product items. If they can raise those prices that way, they certainly can tag those items that you recalled. And you and I should not be able to walk out of that store with a product that's been recalled within seconds. And hopefully this bill will change the way we do things here in California. Here's a question from Charles from Santa Barbara. He says, I saw your hearing on the Cal channel on EDD. Why can't we ever get our unemployment checks on time? Charles, I thank you for your question. I just mentioned a few days ago we had a hearing in Sacramento. The hearing focused on the fact that many folks who have paid into a system, when they needed the system, found that they could only get a line that had to be dialed over and over again, only to be turned over to a computer system that in many cases was non-responsive. And at the end of the day, thousands of Californians today still do not have their unemployment checks, even though they have paid into this system, many of which don't have their checks since January. Now, we wanted the bureaucrats to know that you need to understand that people need to pay their rent, they need to make their mortgage, they need to make their child care payments, they need to buy groceries. And until government recognizes that we need to work harder and faster on this project, nothing is going to change. We have made some important recommendations from this hearing. We've asked the governor to use his emergency powers to make sure that we have the manpower necessary at the phones to get these phone calls answered and get these things processed. And I can tell you that I think the message was sent very loud and clear to the bureaucrats. We're not going to stand for any sort of system that allows unemployed folks to lose their home, lose their children, in many cases not to be able to feed their family. I think we're going to have some lasting change from this hearing. Many times you don't have to have legislation, you have to call a hearing, and it's amazing how many things change before a hearing. Before this hearing, I can tell you it was called, and after it was called was like night and day. As soon as this hearing was called, EDD offices were open on the weekend. We then renegotiated a contract with Verizon that somehow saved Californians money because they weren't paying 5 cents a call, and we were ultimately paying a company that should have been having a much better system in place. So I think these hearings are very important, and holding people accountable, as I mentioned earlier, is extremely important. And this is why you want people in government not afraid to call people on the carpet. You want people in government to say, I have a question, and they're questions from everyday people, and they want their answers now. And we're not going to wait 2 or 3 weeks for the letter to come in the mail. I think that's what we need at a statewide level as well. I hope that you see that we can continue to work on that, and we will continue to work on that even as Lieutenant Governor. Let's go on to another question. This is from Jared from Eureka, who wrote, where are you from and how did you get into politics? I should tell you that I'm from a little small town called Shafter, California. In fact, I'm just a few miles away from it now. It's a farm worker town. And I've got involved in politics for one simple reason. My grandmother was a die-hard Kennedy fan, as most Latinas were at that time. Loved John Kennedy, loved Robert Kennedy, and would always send in her $25 to the Democratic Party because she believed in the politics of change. I watched that happen. She became her own precinct captain in this very small place called the Mexican colony that I lived in. People would go to her door to ask how to vote, who to vote for, and why they should vote for her. So I would tell you that my grandmother is really the genesis of my interest in politics. She, in essence, became the voice for many Latinos, many farm workers, who in essence didn't know who to vote for, didn't know how the political process worked. And that transpired into, later in my family, a history of public service. I was very proud that my mother served on the Shafter City Council. Very proud she became mayor. Very proud the fact that now she serves as a commissioner of the high-speed rail. We have had a history in our family of public service. I myself was always in student government in high school. In fact, when I went to UCLA, I became the student body president of UCLA. Very proud of that. We brought a different dimension to UCLA. We brought a diversity to UCLA that it needed in student government. And then I was very fortunate to meet Art Torres, the current chairman of the Democratic Party. Art took me as an intern, taught me the ropes, and I was very fortunate to learn politics at a time before term limits in the California State Senate. So I think it's interesting to return to the California State Senate some 20 years later and now serving in this body. I've had an opportunity to see this body work before term limits and after term limits. And I can tell you one thing, the reason it worked much better than it did today is because oversight and making sure the bureaucrats knew that you were still going to be around and holding them accountable was the reason that a lot of things worked a lot better then. I still think we can have that kind of flavor. We have a wonderful pro tem who has created an oversight committee in the Senate that finally is going to hold folks accountable for change without legislation. And so I'm very happy to have served in public policy for quite a while. You should know I stepped away from Senator Torres' office, went off and got my MBA at Harvard Business School. I think it was good to step out of politics. I think it was good to work in the private sector for a while. I think it was good to run my own company and in fact to sign not only the back of the check but the front of the check. And it gave me a diversity coming back into public service now that I can actually use every single day in the California State Senate to make sure we're working on and making the right decisions. So let's go on to Claudia from Berkeley, who says, I'm a big fan of raw milk and I like the work you're doing to save our milk. Keep up the good work. I won't comment to a comment, but I can tell you, Claudia, that the raw milk issue is like many issues in agriculture. We have to be concerned with the food that we consume and the safety of the food that we consume. And as you know, in our society, we take so many good nutrients today out of our food. It's very difficult today to see all of these products that offer us the ability, our body's own ability, to fight the many things that we see today from antibiotics point of view. Raw milk is one of those products. Raw milk is, in essence, has the ability to give us these important immunities that I think are going to be important moving to the future. It's very much like the conversation we had with antibiotics in our food as well. So yes, Claudia, we will continue to work on raw milk. We'll continue to work on all foods. hopefully that hold on to the nutrients necessary so that our bodies can fight the types of diseases that we're seeing, and we're not going to sanitize everything in this world somehow to make our bodies weaker. Here's another question from Diana from El Centro. Senator Florez, is the Lieutenant Governor office important at all? We never hear from them until election time, so what's going to change with you in there? Is the Lieutenant Governor's office even relevant? This is a big debate, obviously, year after year, election cycle after election cycle, whether or not the Lieutenant Governor's office can actually affect change. I can tell you that I wouldn't be running for Lieutenant Governor if I didn't believe this position had a lot more potential than we're currently looking at today. I think what we need from the Lieutenant Governor is a relationship with the Governor. The Lieutenant Governor should be in the cabinet meetings. The Lieutenant Governor should be working with the Governor. The Lieutenant Governor should take on functions that the Governor, quite frankly, as busy as governors are, can't or have the time to work on. I think it's good for the governors to have partners and lieutenant governors. And I think there's enough to work on today, whether you're in the same party or not in the same party. I don't think there's a Republican or Democrat out there today that doesn't believe that we can work on the inefficiencies of government. We have so many inefficient problems in government. And a lot of that can be served with IT. A lot of it can be served with technology. There's no reason for prisoners to travel to a specialist and back to the prison over and over and over again. It's costing us thousands of overtime hours, and in many cases only to see a specialist to be sent back with a bottle of pills. We need telemedicine in our prisons. We need telemedicine in our clinics. We need things that make sense. We need to make sure all of our systems are connected from an IT perspective. Those efficiencies save us money. We can downsize government, but if we don't have the types of technologies necessary to do that, it's going to be very difficult to do that. So I would say that as Lieutenant Governor, the Lieutenant Governor needs to take the reins, take the responsibility, take a portion of government and work on it very hard over the next 4 years or 8 years, and make sure that there are some cost savings that come from these types of tasks. So I would say that whoever our governor is in 2010, I look forward to working with them. And I look forward to saying that they'll have a partner, regardless of party, to make the changes necessary that Californians are expecting. And I can tell you there isn't a California out there that thinks that this government is working in the most efficient manner that it can. Here's a question from Terry from Sacramento. It says, I know you've been a champion for high-speed rail, but is it really needed in California? First and foremost, let me say that given that my mother is a commissioner on high-speed rail, given the fact that I myself served on the High-Speed Rail Commission, I don't have to tell you how important high-speed rail is. In fact, if you look at the last election cycle, as tough as things were in Californians gave a thumbs up to high-speed rail for one reason. We're a large state. In many cases, if you look at Europe, our state is as large as connecting countries. And yet they are connected by a high-speed rail system. Mexico City is building a high-speed rail system. China has a high-speed rail system. And California, as broad as we are, from San Diego all the way up to Eureka, we need to move Californians through the state in a better, cheaper, more efficient manner. I can tell you that everyday people look at airline prices today and say, how would I do it with a family of 4? And I can tell you, just to go from San Diego to Sacramento or from San Francisco to Bakersfield, these costs are enormous. High-speed rail will finally bring, if anything, competition for our airlines. And I can tell you that competition is a good thing. Magical things happen in many cases when we have industries that are able to compete. And I see a lower environment in terms of fares, both at the airline level and at the high-speed rail level, as this system moves online. I'm very happy the voters passed it. I know that they're working very hard to get the first phase done. And I think that was probably the most monumental vote by Californians to make this process work. And so I'm very excited about high-speed rail, Terry. I hope that you will stand by it. It's going to be a long process. But you know, at the end of the day, people always ask, will I ever be able to ride on it? And I would only tell you, it's something my grandmother used to tell me. Sometimes you plant a tree for the shade it will give your grandkids. And you know what? High-speed rails was one of those things. We're going to plant the seed, we're going to watch the tree grow, and if we're not on the rail, we know it'll be there for our kids and grandkids, and you know what? At some point we need to make those types of decisions. The next question is from Shirley from Los Gatos. What exactly are you doing about our water after 3 years of drought? And I need to know what the California legislature is going to do to fix this problem. I think I mentioned earlier our water bond proposal. I can tell you that our pro tem is doing a wonderful job of pulling all of the parties together to try to figure out what is the best water policy for California. I'm proud to work with him. And I can tell you that the water policy is not being ignored in Sacramento. I see something very substantial occurring in this session. And I think it's finally about time that we recognize that, as I mentioned earlier, we cannot sustain 50 million Californians in this state on a water system built for 18 million. I mean, it's like you and I having a house and watching 28 people move in with the same 2 bathrooms. At some point, you need to fix the plumbing. You need to expand, if you will, the resources. And unless we're going to do that, we're not going to have a very viable California. There's nothing more important than water in this state. And until we learn how to do this in a peaceful manner, agreeing with each other and getting things completed by region, it's going to be a very tough road. I'm glad that we're all working on that in Sacramento. I do know it's a priority. The next question I have is from Jose Sanchez from Delano. And he says, hey, Senator Florez, from all of the farm workers out here, thanks for caring about us and helping us with our heat and water regulations. What do you think needs to happen next? Let me be very clear on the work for farm workers is not over. Even though we have done vans and we have protected farm workers from, if you will, stress in the field, there are still folks that are not implementing the heat regs. There's still a battle in the fields for those who still don't get the message. And I can tell you that we will work as hard as we can as Lieutenant Governor to get the word out that farm workers, who still in many cases don't get to participate in overtime pay, who still in many cases don't have the shade and water and rest, even though these regulations are in place, the time has come now. What is next is to enforce these regulations and to make sure that employers recognize that we will not rest until the full extent of all of the laws we have passed for farm workers are implemented. And I hopefully plan to continue to work on that as we move forward. Next question. Abe from Oakland says, why does Sacramento pass so many laws? Is it really necessary? Abe, I can tell you, number one question I get out there, why do you guys pass so many laws, 3,000 or so a year? First, some good news. The Pro Tem and our leadership in the Senate have downsized the amount of bills given the budget crisis, and more importantly, getting members to focus in on their priorities. I think that's a wonderful decision by our Pro Tem and the leadership in the Senate. I can tell you that I would believe the best thing to do is not to introduce so many bills and to do more oversight. We have so many laws on the books, we never go back to see if they're actually being implemented. Look at all the laws were passed, if you will, over the last 5 years, and you'll find on any given day that most of them are not being implemented by the administration in a way that you and I would expect. We just found this out the other day with EDD, and where we had $66.1 million given to make sure our computer system was fixed so people weren't waiting for their checks. You know what? 7 years later, not a penny has been spent. In fact, all of that has been in the planning stages. And I know Californians must wonder, who is looking out for the fact that nothing is actually implemented? This committee was shocked. In fact, we're demanding that these projects get put online immediately. But you can't find those things out without good old-fashioned oversight. You have to have the ability to ask the hard questions. In fact, we don't need legislation in many cases. We have to ask the right question, with the right temperament, and with the right resolve. And I think ultimately, if we do that, we can minimize the amount of laws. We can actually make people feel that they have to be accountable to you, the taxpayers. And we may save some money. As I mentioned earlier, with the Oracle issue we worked on a few years ago, saved the state over $95 million because we were able to look into a contract that wasn't needed and ultimately saved us and got us back $95 million. Those are the kinds of things you do with oversight. Didn't take a bill, didn't take anything other than good old-fashioned, let's put a little sunshine on this and let's make sure that things change. And we were very thankful that we finally got our money back. Let's go ahead and take another one here. Here's one from Amanda from San Bernardino. Our kids are eating unhealthy food full of hormones, antibiotics. How do we let this happen? I think I mentioned this earlier. Amanda, you should know that I have an 8-year-old. She is going to school. She's wondering herself why the school lunch program isn't what it should be. And I've heard the arguments in Sacramento. We've had many hearings on this, that free food from the federal government somehow is the best food for our kids. I don't think that's the case. In fact, I'm very happy that President Obama doubled the budget finally to make sure that our school lunches are in a place where we can actually get them up to par. And you mentioned antibiotics. Let me say that I'm always shocked when I see places who drive the market like McDonald's saying that they're no longer going to use chicken that has antibiotics in it. I think that if McDonald's can make a decision not to use that type of chicken, our schools should make those decisions not to use that type of chicken. And we're pretty bad shape if McDonald's is healthier than our school lunch program. And I can tell you that these are the types of bills we have in the process right now to make sure that we can change that system so that our schools have the healthiest lunches, that they have fresh fruits and vegetables, that they have the kind of milk that is hormone free, so that their bodies have that opportunity to grow in a way and they're not susceptible to the types of things that we're seeing with MRSA and the other types of things that are getting to us later in our hospitals. Our food has everything to do with it, and as you know, our children are captive eaters. They eat what puts in front of them. They don't have the choices as many as you and I do to bypass it in the grocery store. So I think our school lunch program is extremely important. Senator Romero and I had a hearing just on this topic, and we were shocked to learn that when we had the peanut outbreak and that our school system had served almost 37% of the bad product, that product with salmonella, that product that was contaminated, was consumed by our kids. And the fact is that not a school district, I guarantee you, told you that your kid ate some of that food. We always want to say the good news, but you know what? It would have been nice to have a notice, to know that in essence that maybe some of our kids ate this product, so we can look out for those warning signs. We've got to be better than this in government. We've got to stand up and tell people sometimes what they don't want to hear. And I think it would have been nice to know that. Senator Romero and I will continue to work on that issue. Food safety is of concern for her in our schools as they are for me. Let's go to Max. Let's go to, wow, there's a lot of these questions, a ton of them. From Darcy. I'm trying to skip around the state here. From Santa Monica. It says, Dean, thank you for standing up for Prop 2 and the way we humanely treat animals. Your support was needed, and you came through. What's next on your agenda for animals on the farm? I can tell you, Darcy, we have a bill now, and as you know, I said animal welfare is an important part of the new Agriculture Committee. How we humanely treat animals is very, very important to me. In fact, we have a bill that ends a practice that we should ban everywhere in the nation. I think California will take the lead in this. Right now there's a practice called, if you will, taking cows' tails and docking them. And docking them means, in essence, you put a ring around it so tight that the tail inhumanely falls out. Very painful process. There's really no need for it in our dairy cows. And we have a bill that would ban that practice in this state. I can tell you that that bill is supported by myself, the Humane Society, and a whole host of animal welfare agencies, but more importantly supported by my daughter, an 8-year-old in Shafter, California, who asked me the question, Dad, why do we do this? It's so painful for the cows. And she actually did her own research on it. In fact, she found out that this was just a practice that people just do because they've always done it. I think that's wrong, and I think, in fact, if you follow our legislation, we're going to get this to the governor's desk. We want the governor to sign this because there's no reason that our animals have to be treated in that way. And we look forward to working this bill through the legislature. And I'm going to be very proud of my daughter standing next to the governor, and he has the opportunity to sign that bill once it gets to his desk, because there's no way that we can continue to treat our farm animals the way we have been. We don't need any more hallmarks with cows being pushed through, downer cows, for food. And we certainly don't need the types of treatments that we have in many cases for some of our farm animals. We've got to change that policy. Our new Ag Committee is interested in that, and we're very, very happy to continue to work on those issues. Okay, let me go on to some more questions. Let's see here. Wow. Okay, here's one. Senator Florez from Terry from Pixley. She says, what about the communities that have been forgotten? We don't have anything over here. No streets, no sidewalks, clean water. What are we supposed to do? Terry, you should know, if you're listening out there in California, Terry's very indicative of the rural communities in our state, some of the communities that I represent. And in fact, many of these rural communities, whether it's Pixley or Lamont, California, or whether it's Ducor and Buttonwillow, and I say those names, and many Californians and many people in the legislature wonder if I'm talking about a town in California. Yes, folks, we have these areas called unincorporated areas, many of them, which still don't have sidewalks, gutters. Many of them are on septic tanks. Many of them are the most ignored communities. You know those as the unincorporated communities. And we have a bill this year that finally says these colonias, as we call them, should be given more attention. In fact, the poverty rates in every county actually drive. The poverty rates in every county actually drive the amount of money we get from the federal government to fight poverty. I think it's a travesty to watch all of that money being generated from counties from the federal government, to see none of it going back to the communities that created the money in the first place. I think it's wrong when people share money in rich areas that were driven off the backs of poor, poverty-stricken areas in terms of federal money. We have a bill that would realign that, to say that if you're generating these types of, you're in Pixley, California, in an impoverished area, then Pixley, California ought to be getting first dibs at the money coming from the federal government. We have a bill that as I mentioned, this Colonia's bill that finally redoes the entire way we think about impoverished communities and finally tries to get them into the mix. And I hope that you'll follow that. We sometimes believe we all live in these urban cities. You know, there are cities like Shafter, California that I live in. Believe it or not, we don't have a Starbucks. We don't have some of the things that a lot of Californians do, and we have to work to make sure that there's some changes in this system that make this a much better process. Okay, let me see a few more questions. Let's see, I think we just keep scrolling here, guys, a lot of them. Keep going. Here we go. This is from Dr. Tomas Martinez, who says, do you plan on continuing your leadership in the fight to clean California's air? Dr. Martinez from Fresno, thank you for asking that question. I can tell you that we will continue to work on the clean air front. There are many, many types of things that we need to continue to work on, and clean air is one of those, because we can't just turn the corner and say everything is okay. We have a lot of issues, as you probably know, with the air quality and our children continuing to take inhalers. Our laws made a huge difference, but ultimately what we're attempting to do is to make sure that the types of laws that we're pushing forward are going to have some benefit directly to the end user. So I hope that you know that we'll continue to work on that. There's a lot of work to be done, and we're going to have to turn our attention to cars and some of the smog creating. Our ports are huge issues in Long Beach and in Los Angeles and Oakland, and so we need to continue to work on that. And I think that's where we'll turn our attention to these new technologies that ultimately can make air pollution much better. You know, there's a great technology out in Long Beach that we saw a demonstration on. It actually covers, if you will, steamships, some of these large boats, takes their emissions and keeps them out of the air and actually processes them in a much better way. Wonderful technology like that. It needs to move through the Air Resources Board, which it has, but it also needs to go through some of the smaller areas in terms of decision making, like the LA port, like the Oakland port. So I hope that you know that the technology necessary to clean the air is not our next challenge. We need to make sure that we work on those issues and that these technologies aren't hidden in some broom closet. They have to be pushed forward, and they have to have champions, and they have to be moving through the process. So I'm very excited about the clean air front. I still think that we can make that a real reality going forward, and a lot of work to do. Okay, let's go on to a few more questions. There is a question from Elizabeth Torres from Los Angeles. She is a member of the UTLA. She says, as an elementary school teacher who's seen many of her friends lose their jobs with pink slips and other hurtful cuts, what are you willing to do to ensure that federal stimulus dollars are spent immediately and the full amount allocated to education actually reaches our schools? Great question. Everyone's asking us what the, if you will, the federal stimulus dollars, what we're going to do with them, how they're going to be put to work. I'm glad to see the governor today announce an inspector general to make sure that the monies are spent in the right way. But we would have been more excited if the governor told us what exactly his plan is to make this a much more viable system for education in this. I can tell you that we have been tracking this in the state Senate. Our job in Sacramento is to not get in the way. So many times we put our bureaucracy into this, and somehow less than $1 gets to the localities that you've mentioned, our schools. I think the cleanest way to deal with this is to make sure our state auditor monitors the federal stimulus dollars, that Sacramento doesn't take a cut of any of these dollars, and in fact it gets right down to the classroom and it gets right down to the teachers. You know, the pink slip issue needs to be avoided. It's a very difficult discussion in Sacramento with education, no doubt. I can tell you that we have always stood with education. We will continue to stand with education, and we will make sure that our priorities remain the teachers, the students, because they're the interactions that matter in education. So I hope that you know that we're going to continue to make sure stimulus dollars move in the right direction, and ultimately we want to make sure that you feel comfortable in that. Stick with us on that, but we'll make sure it gets down to you. Okay, let's see. Other questions here. Okay, how do you feel? This is from Tammy, private citizen, and she's from Tulare County. How do you feel about more transparent state government? From the Central Valley, I was wondering how you might assist us in getting more Democrats here. Well, I'll skip the last question for a moment, but let me just talk about transparency in government. I think one of the things that I'm very interested in is making sure that government is as transparent as possible. You know, we have a lot of oversight hearings that I mentioned. It's amazing to me how much gets done when things are more transparent from a bureaucracy, from an administration to a legislative point of view. I hope that you know that transparency solves a lot. In fact, we have done quite a bit in this field, and I hope that you will stick with us. We need to continue to have those types of hearings, and I hope that, as I mentioned earlier, you'll see that these transparent natures are extremely important to us. Let's see, other questions? Okay, here's one from Juan Esparza, who I know is a reporter. He says, why are you running for lieutenant governor instead of some other position? I think it was the first question that was I mentioned at the very beginning of this. Juan, I can tell you that as lieutenant governor, I think there's a lot of potential there. I think, in fact, if you're an active lieutenant governor, if you can move through California, have the resolve to go to issues, you can, in essence, function and work with the governor as one more arm of that particular administration. I plan to go just about everywhere I can in this state as lieutenant governor. I plan to go to where people need some government, if you will, some push, some voices, someone to get in the mix, someone to come back to Sacramento and said, I was in Rialto, or I happened to be in Oakland, or I was just in Alameda, and I found out that something in Brawley is as important to them as it is to others. You need to travel this state, and more importantly, you need to go to the meetings that matter. It isn't enough to go to the UC Regents meeting, the Cal State board meeting. It isn't enough to go to the meetings that you're assigned to. The important part of the lieutenant governor's position is to go out and be with the people. It's to actually go out and hear their voices and to bring it back every single day. The governor's a very busy person. In fact, the governor is very much caught legislating most of the day, or looking at legislation coming towards his desk. The lieutenant governor is a freer position to go out to all the Californians and make sure that we bring back the perspective of everyday Californians into that discussion. And it is a position, I think, that works very well with me. You know, we have been all up and down this state. Many of you have seen the many issues we've worked on, and I think we're involved in just about every issue that has mattered when they needed someone to show and to make sure that their voice was heard. Our office gets those calls and we go. And the reason we go is because we believe that we don't have to shy to the, if you will, give in to the politics as usual, that we can actually think out of the box, that we can take on the challenges that Californians expect us to take. And I think the lieutenant governor, having a much freer schedule, has the ability to do that. And so that's why I think this lieutenant governor position is much better for me. And I think it's going to be much better for Californians if, in fact, I'm elected lieutenant governor. Okay, let's go on to a few more questions. Let's see. Go on, just scroll down. These are all kind of similar. Scroll down a little more. Okay. Here's the question from what is your position on the ballot initiatives? And this is going to be very important on May 19th, a very important election here in California. I hope everyone supports these ballot initiatives. I know they're very tough decisions. I know they're very tough types of positions to take, but I can tell you that we need the types of things in many cases to make this a workable solution for Californians. This budget process that we worked through isn't something that was easy, but I can tell you that the ballot initiatives that are out there, I hope everyone takes a good look at them. I think they're worthy of people's support, and I think ultimately we want to see, if you will, a much better type of system, and I think the ballot initiatives are going to give us that. Okay, let's go on to a few more. I did have some questions here that were sent in earlier, even before the website started. I wonder if I can see a couple of those. Website, let's see. Okay. let's see, let's scroll down a little bit more. Okay, let's see. Okay, here's a few more questions that were sent in by Maggie from Los Angeles. She says, I heard about your ideas on checks for recalled stuff at the supermarket. How will this keep our kids safe? Maggie, thanks for the question. I think I mentioned earlier that we have been working very hard on recalled food. I do want you to know that one of the safest places to deal with recalled food is as soon as the federal government tells us something is recalled. Let's use the peanut butter scare. 2,500 products, 3,700 products. It's very difficult for you and I to walk through a grocery store to figure out what's recalled and what isn't, whether it's a Cliff Bar or whether it's Sara Lee cakes. But we do know that there's a product number, and we do know that the FDA ultimately can and has the ability to talk to supermarkets, code their products, so by the time we get to that scanner, we can absolutely have that product show up as recalled right there at the scanner as you're purchasing this, and hopefully within minutes of the recall being called. We have a bill moving through the legislature today with actually help in food safety by stopping it right at that level. And guess what? There are already folks that do this, whether you're Target or whether you're Costco. In other states, they have implemented this. There's no reason in California that we should not implement this particular system. In fact, I want you to know that this bill will be moving through the legislature in the next couple of weeks, and we want to make sure everyone is on board with this. This is the last line of defense before you walk out of that door to make sure that anything from baby food to any product that is on a recalled list isn't taken out at the scanning level. And so hopefully you'll stick with us on that, and we'll continue to move forward. Next question is from Tom and Merced, who ask, what is the majority leader and what do you do? That's a great question. I was very fortunate to be named majority leader by our pro tem, Darrell Steinberg. I can tell you what I try to do as majority leader every single day is to help Darrell Steinberg do the best he can as the leader of our Senate, make this place work in a much better way. I don't see my role any different as Lieutenant Governor, as I mentioned earlier. I think what people need are partners. I'm very proud to serve as Darrell Steinberg and my caucus's majority leader. The job is to make sure that ultimately these types of things, these types of issues, we're working together on these. And I want you to know that the majority leader's position has been a wonderful position to work from. I enjoy working with all my colleagues. I enjoy being, if you will, a sounding voice for our pro tem and for the rest of the caucus. And presiding over the Senate is something that the majority leader has done and I continue to do. I think it's an honor to preside over the California State Senate floor sessions to make sure that the debate is moving in the right direction and that we're actually producing the right types of things moving forward. I do know that our hour is getting near. I can tell you that I want to make sure that you know that I'm absolutely excited to run for Lieutenant Governor. If you couldn't tell, I'm talking a mile a minute. And the reason for that is I get excited about this. I think a Lieutenant Governor position could be a wonderful position if the right person is there. And many folks have asked, are you in this to the end? I want you to know that I'm in this to the end. I want to run for Lieutenant Governor. I want to win the primary next June, and I want to make sure that I win in November. And I think Democrats and all folks in this state should be proud that we're going to have a wonderful, hopefully new view, a new face at the statewide level. Not to knock our most experienced candidates, but nothing is wrong with having new, fresh ideas at the statewide level. And I'm excited to do that. I want to thank you for your time, and I want to thank you for tuning in to this first ever California website announcement. I think it's wonderful that we received so many comments. I would encourage you to continue to send your comments in even after we go off air. We will get back to each and every one of you. I think everyone deserves their questions to be answered, and more importantly, this has been a wonderful back and forth with you Californians, and I continue to ask you to stay with us. We're excited, and thank you for joining us today.